So welcome everyone. My name is Rosa Villegas, and today we're going to be talking about curricular practical training. I am one of the educational advisors at PCC, and I have two other co-workers with me. If you would like to introduce yourselves, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Sandra Parr. I'm the Senior Clerk at the International Student Center, and we're just glad to have you here today.
Hi, I'm Kathy. I'm also an educational advisor at the International Student Center. Nice to see you here today.
Thank you, ladies. And thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time off of your busy schedule. So hopefully this information will be helpful to you if you're interested in applying for curricular practical training. So we're gonna get started with it, and let's see. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. So once again, welcome and thank you for being here today. So what we're going to cover today is going to be what is CPT, CPT eligibility, requirements for CPT, how do you apply for CPT, the benefits of applying for CPT. We're going to provide you with some resources as well as time for questions at the end. So let's get started. I wanted to share this quote with all of you today. Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. So we are learning a lot through our classes, through our friends, to our colleagues. Each and every day we're learning something new, but we also have to think about what we're learning. That's how I take this quote. So I just thought it was relevant to today's topic. So first of all, we're going to describe what CPT is. And CPT is short for Curricular Practical Training. So throughout the presentation, I might just say CPT. That way you all know what I'm referring to. It is a training that is integral or required part of the student's curriculum. So that's one of the most important things I will say about CPT. It must be required by your program or your major in order to do CPT. It is a temporary work authorization for practical training, meaning you are considered working, but it's only temporary and it's training related to your major. It's, as I say, it's a training directly related to the student's major area of study. For example, if you're a nursing major and you want to apply for CPT, one of your classes may require you to do field work, and that's great because you're going to be practicing your lectures from class while you go to the hospital and you do your clinicals. However, if you are in the nursing major and you want to do a CPT in an office, answering phones, creating letters, then that's not going to be directly related to your major. Most likely will not be approved, even though it's a training and it might be a good training, a good skill that you're learning, is not directly related to your nursing major. Therefore, like I said, will probably not be approved. CPT happens while you are in school, meaning while you're still taking your classes. Later on, I'm going to show you when you meet the eligibility to apply for CPT, but you cannot just apply for CPT and not be taking classes. And we will go over what the requirements are. There are different, they're not types of CPT, but they're classified different. So when you're doing CPT, when you apply for CPT, you can be earning money, meaning your CPT, your employment is paid, your training is paid, or it can also be unpaid. But remember that all type of employment needs to be approved. So regardless if you're getting paid or not, you are going to have to get authorization before you start your employment or training. You can apply for part-time CPT, and that's usually what most students do because they'll be taking it during the fall semester or the spring semester. But you also have the benefit of applying for full-time CPT, in which you can do more than 20 hours. This is most likely going to happen during the summer break. So your summer break is not a requirement where international students need to be enrolled full-time. But if you're interested in applying for CPT, you will have to enroll at least in the major class that requires you to do field work or the internship class. Something to keep in mind when you're applying for CPT is that if you're only doing part-time CPT, most of the students here at CPT will be fine. They can do it as many times as they want or as many semesters as they want. However, if you accumulate 12 months of full-time CPT, then you will not be eligible for OPT. Basically, I don't see this as an issue with community college because if you're only doing full-time CPT during the summer, it's only about 6 weeks, which is about a month and a half. And you usually, or students in the community college usually finish their program in about 3 years. So most likely students will not come close to doing 12 months of full-time CPT at PCC. But if you're interested in doing CPT part-time, you can do it as many semesters as you want to, as long as you continue to meet the eligibility requirements. So now that you know what CPT means and what kind of CPT you can apply for, now we're going to discuss the eligibility to apply for it. So first and foremost, you need to have a valid F1 status. This is a benefit for F1 students only. It doesn't apply if you have a different visa category. You must have been enrolled full-time and completed 1 academic year. So here at PCC, you have to have completed 2 semesters, fall or spring or fall, depending on when you started, but it has to be 1 year, complete year. As I mentioned earlier, you must be enrolled in classes, either full-time unless you are approved for reduced course load. This does not apply, but I wanted to mention it in case you have friends at the language programs. So students at the ESL program are not eligible to apply for CPT. It only applies to higher education, community college, bachelor's programs. In order to apply for CPT, you actually need to have a job offer letter. And I will explain to you why the job offer letter is required. As I said earlier, you are required to be registered in a major class or the internship class. PCC, we're grateful that they started offering internship courses. So students, even if your major doesn't have a class that has a requirement to do field work or practice, then you have the opportunity to sign up for an internship class that will allow you to do field work and practice and apply for CPT. For example, something like humanities major. I don't think any of the classes to earn the associate degree in humanities requires students to do field work. But that doesn't mean you don't have the opportunity to do an internship and apply for CPT, because now we have the internship class. So as long as you meet the requirements for the internship class, then you can register for the class and you will be able to do the fieldwork internship. If you attended our last week's presentation on intern as an international student, then you know that right now is a perfect time to apply for internships if you're considering doing an internship during the summer. So I'm glad that you're all here today because you are on a road to be prepared and ready to apply for the internships and also know the eligibility to apply for CPT. And you're also going to learn how to apply during this presentation. So what is required to apply for CPT? You will need to obtain authorization before beginning the employment. So plan ahead. Like I said, right now it's perfect timing if you want to do it for summer. Some students may still find an internship for spring, which can still be possible and can be approved. It just getting the proper documentation ready and submitting it to our office. CPT is approved by, you're gonna hear these terms a lot, designated school official. That will be one of us, which is the educational advisors in the international office. So you might hear DSO or you might hear educational advisor is the same. It's just different titles. CPT occurs during the student's program and study. So like I say, you have to be enrolled in classes to be eligible to apply for CPT. And your I-20 must also have a valid date. For example, I-20s from PCC usually end at the end of June if you're graduating in spring, and at the end of December if you are graduating in fall. So right now we're in spring, students are graduating in spring, their I-20 has a program end date of June 30th. If the student is interested in doing an internship, then the first step will be to extend the I-20 to cover the summer term session and then apply for CPT. Otherwise, the I-20 will not be valid to apply for CPT. When students apply for CPT, it's only authorized for a specific employer and for a specific period. What this means is that if you are applying to work at Google and Google hire you and give you an internship and you get authorization from the advisor, when we report the recommendation and authorize the approval for CPT, you can only work for Google. You're not going to be able to go to Amazon, for example, because you didn't get approved to work in Amazon. Even though you have work or training authorization, it's only for the specific employer. If you change, you obviously can report the change and let us know so we can give you the new authorization. What it means for a specific period is that you have a start date and an end date. Those dates have to be within the semester that you enroll in the class that requires you to do the field work. So the nursing class for spring semester, we started February 16, we're gonna end June 14. June 14 will be your last date of approved CPT. If you continue to enroll in another class during summer or during fall, and you plan to do CPT again, then you will need, the student needs to submit all the paperwork again because we have to approve it again. And we have to give you the new I-20 that shows that you are approved for the new semester. So you can go past the semester end date. I receive a lot of questions regarding volunteering and unpaid internships. As I said earlier, any type of employment requires authorization and approval. Volunteer work does not require approval from our office, from the international office, but you have to be very careful not to cross the lines between volunteer and unpaid internships, because volunteer means you're giving your valuable time, you're doing something for an organization that is mostly charitable. For example, you're cleaning the beach. That comes out of your good heart that you want to do something nice for others, for your community. However, if you go to a business and you say, oh, I'm going to volunteer and I'm going to be helping them with their accounting because my major is accounting and it's I'm learning something and they're letting me volunteer. You have to be careful. Students have to be very careful because that's not volunteer. You're gaining experience. So even though the company is not going to pay you, we will need to report it as CPT, even though it's unpaid. So unpaid or paid internships have to be approved and they have to be authorized on your I-20 that shows that you are legally able to be at that company doing the type that you're doing that is related to your job, to your major, because you're gaining the experience. So if you have questions about it, if it's not clear, make sure you ask, make sure you schedule an appointment with one of us so we can determine if it's really volunteer, or if it's just an unpaid internship that requires authorization. Students, employment is one of the benefits that F1 students have, and therefore you may have two employment authorizations. And one perfect example is when our campus was open a year ago, many of our students were working on campus, and some departments were giving them up to 20 hours, the maximum, which is part-time, but some students were only working 10 hours. And so they found opportunities, internships that will give them employment training. So they could still do them, they could still apply for them, but in total, you cannot go over 20 hours. So you can do 10-hour on-campus employment, for example, and 10-hour of CPT under a paid or unpaid internship. So just make sure that do not go over the 20 hours per week, regardless if it's one or two authorizations that you have. And another requirement, just like other things that F1 students have to do, students are required to report any changes to the International Student Center advisor. So for example, if you started an internship and it was only for 2 months during the semester, and you finish it, but you were still looking for a different internship and you found another one, then we need to report the new one. So that's a change because you are receiving a new job offer letter. It may be a new company, maybe the same company, but different title. It's still related to your major, but it still is a change that needs to be reported. So always work with us as the international advisors to let you know, yes, this needs to be reported because we reported to CBIS, to the government. So make sure your record is clean, that there is nothing that you're doing that don't have authorization for. And if you're one of the lucky ones that found an internship that is paid, unfortunately, you also have to file taxes. and pay the government your taxes. So if you're doing internships this year that I pay, next year, 2021, 2022, I'm sorry, I'm way behind, then you're gonna have to file taxes for the income that you earn. So always follow through and make sure you file taxes if you earn any income. Okay, I've been talking a lot and saying a lot, and you're like, okay, now I know what it is. What do I need to, what are my requirements? And I do meet eligibility. How do I apply? So how do you apply for CPT? One of the questions that you ask yourself first is, am I enrolled in a class that requires fieldwork or clinicals? The perfect example for clinicals is the nursing program. Some of the majors that I'm aware of that require fieldwork are, for example, child development, because some of the classes require students to go to the child development center or any center that works with kids to do fieldwork, to do practice hours. Paralegal program has classes that require students to go do some hours in a law firm to practice the training. So, but if your major does not have a class, then obviously we talked about it, it's you're gonna sign up for the internship class. So your major has a class that requires field work. It's a few steps. You're gonna secure the internship. You're gonna register for the class. You are gonna meet with an academic counselor and request the CPT recommendation. You're gonna submit the request to our office, the international office. You submit the request with the job offer letter, because we're gonna need the job offer letter. Once we process your request, we're gonna contact the student, you, and say your request is ready. We have your I20 ready with the approval of CPT. And I'm gonna show you where it shows on the I20. And then if the dates are valid, you can start your CPT. On the other hand, if none of your classes require field work, this is where you're gonna look and register for the internship course. This is gonna require an extra step because you're gonna secure the internship. And then the next step will be to contact Dr. Kimberly Chediak. She's a faculty member in charge of facilitating and coordinating and supporting the internship courses. So you email her and say, Dr. Chediak, I have an internship. Here's my job offer letter. She'll get back to you within a day or two, let you know which internship class to register for based on the job offer letter. If it's unpaid or paid, there are two classes, so she'll let you know, and she will also determine the number of units that the internship class will be that you need to register for. And it all goes based on the job offer letter, and if she needs some clarification, she'll get back to you and say, hey, I need this additional information to determine the class. So it will be between the student and her. Once you determine which is the right class for you to register, you're going to register for your class. At that point, you're going to meet with the academic counselor and follow the steps. Request a recommendation, submit paperwork to us, the international office, and receive the authorization. So if your major does not require fieldwork or clinicals, then the internship class will allow you as a student to apply for internships and apply for CPT. How do you prepare to apply for CPT? So I put together a checklist that hopefully, if you see it, I mean, I'm more of a visual person. Hopefully this will help you not only listening, but seeing and know the steps that need to be followed. So if you have never heard of CPT and you're hearing it from the first time today, you may have questions and need more clarification. So we always recommend schedule an appointment with an education advisor to discuss eligibility and requirements. Once we have our meeting together, we're gonna say, yes, you meet eligibility, you're ready to start looking for an internship. Or no, you still don't meet the 1 year requirement, for example, you should wait until next spring or next summer. So we will guide you through the process and let you know. If you meet the requirements, then you're gonna apply and secure your internship. Make sure when you're interviewing for your internships that the company gives you a job offer letter, because that document is gonna be needed for two things. For us to approve you for the CPT, and also if it's a paid internship, that job offer letter will be needed to apply for a social security number. So make sure you get a job offer letter. In the next slide, I think I'm gonna show you what does the job offer letter need to include. So make sure when you finally get the internship that you ask the company or your supervisor, your future supervisor, that you need the job offer letter. You're gonna register for your major class, your nursing class, or your internship class. The internship classes currently offer are either Business 0708 and Business 070B. A is paid internship, B is not paid. So again, this is gonna be determined by Dr. Shediak based on your job offer letter. So it kind of goes step by step. After you register for your class, you meet with the academic counselor and you request your recommendation. It's pretty much what I had said earlier, but I just wanted you to see in a different visual. You're gonna submit the CPT request to us, the International Student Center. We will process and create a new I20. It's pretty much the same I20 that you have, but on the second page, we're gonna include your approval for CPT. If the internship is a paid internship and as of now, a student does not have a social security number, then the next step will be to apply for a social security number. And to apply for a social security number, our office, the international office, will give you a supporting letter as well as your job offer letter to go apply for the social security number. Once you finish all the steps, the semester has started and the dates that you're approved to work are in effect, you can begin the internship. Sorry, I'm talking too much. So I say the job offer letter is a very critical document in the process of applying for CPT. When you receive your job offer letter, make sure it includes the following. It has to be in the company's letterhead. Make sure it has your name as the student approved for the internship or that received the job offer. We need the job title or position. If you're gonna be, I'm not sure if you're a nurse, nurse trainer, or whatever the company's titles are, make sure they put it in the letter. A brief description of the duties that you're going to be performing as part of your training related to your major. So something that they describe what you're going to be doing. We also need the company's name and address. If the office is in one place, but you're actually going to be doing the training in a different location, make sure you provide both locations to us. We need to know if the work training is part-time or full-time. We also need to know if it's paid or unpaid. And the company needs to include the dates that they're employing you at that place. We also need the supervisor's name and contact information. So all of this is required in the job offer letter because we're gonna need it to issue the I-20. We're getting there. So now you know, okay, why should I apply for CPT? What do I get out of it? Well, you do have quite a few benefits if you're approved as to do internship field work. So you're getting more training experience outside of the classroom. It's like a learning environment. You're getting the experience in the US workplace. So some of you may have worked overseas in your home countries, but the environment may be different here in the US. So you get to see how we work in the US. You start to build up or increase your personal and professional confidence. If maybe you came to the US after you graduated high school, you didn't have an opportunity to work before starting your college education, then now you're going to get more confidence because now you're going to have work experience as well, not just book experience, book training. And you're going to get valuable skills that are transferable to other, things that you do in life. For example, right now you're just focusing on learning and your lectures, submitting your homework assignments and all your assignments, but you have many skills that you're going to apply in the workplace and then can be transferable to pretty much anything that you do in life. As I said earlier, you're applying what you're learning in your class through your meetings with your professors, what your professor is teaching. Now you're putting it in practice to actually do field work, to actually know what it means to balance a book if you're an accounting major. So maybe you did practice sheets in your class, but now you're actually doing it for a company. You can see the value of what you learn in the classroom and applying it to actual document, the actual record of a company. And you get to explore different industries. We have students that maybe when they come in, they say, well, I want to be a psychology major. And they take some of the classes and they apply for CPT after they meet the eligibility. They go out there and do a field work or internship and they're like, oh, this is not for me. So it's better to find out sooner rather than later. Maybe you already spent 1 year in taking classes in psychology, you did your field work and it wasn't something that you liked, then you can always change to something else. I mean, you learn something. It's not that your time and money went to waste, but you find out that it's not really what you expected. Or maybe you loved it and you're like, yeah, this is what I really want to do, because now you've seen what you're actually going to be doing when you graduate. So it could go either way, but it gives you the opportunity to explore in case, you're not 100% sure if that's what you want to graduate or that's what you major want to do. So processing time. Internships, you have to really plan ahead because it's kind of like looking for a job. So if you're interested in, or that your major requires you to do field work, then you got to start thinking early on. Because once you're like, okay, I really want to do this internship and the company hire me and I'm supposed to start today, but you haven't even submitted paperwork to us, we cannot backdate anything. So make sure you plan ahead. Like I said, on last week's workshop, we got a lot of information saying that right now is the perfect time to apply for internships for the summer. So If that's something that you're interested in doing, make sure you start looking into it. Our office doesn't take that long. We only take maybe about a week, as long as we receive a complete request from the student. Also keep in mind that if the student needs to apply for a social security number, that's another week or two for Social Security office to process the application. If you're changing jobs, companies, as I said earlier, each company or each authorization, it's only for one employer. So if you finish one and you're starting a new one, we need to do a whole new approval. Make sure you plan accordingly. And each semester requires a new authorization. So even though you may continue, let's say you're working right now, you're doing a training right now during spring, and you know you're gonna continue for the summer, don't just continue working without the approval. Make sure you submit paperwork, because your I-20 currently has a date that ends June 14 for the authorization. So after June 14, students are not allowed to continue working. A new authorization is needed. And it's okay if you submit ahead of time. So my recommendation will be, if, for example, you're planning to do summer field work internship and you want to get approved for the CPT, as soon as you register for the classes, you will submit the request. You start meeting with the counselor and submit the request to us, so that you actually start working on the first day of class. Otherwise, it will have to be once you receive the authorization. This is very important. The government considers working without approval grounds for termination. All of our students are really good, so they're gonna follow the law, they're gonna follow regulations, so only work during the approved time listed on the I-20. Do not begin working before the start date, and do not continue working after the end date. So follow the dates on the I-20. And when I say the I-20 will be your approval, once we process a request, that way that you know that you're approved, it's based on the I-20. Sorry. So a couple of things to keep in mind on the I-20. This is a snapshot of the first page. When I say students have to be in valid F1 status, when we look at the records, and you will not see this, but you will see that it's in active status. That means the student has maintained valid status. Something else to look at it on the first page of the I-20 is the major, because this is what is gonna trigger the internship. So for example, this student is legal assistant paralegal. So any work that the student does, any internship that the student does, has to be related to paralegal. It can't be business, it cannot be nursing, it has to be related paralegal, unless the student changed the major and hasn't updated the I-20. So that will be an extra step. First, make sure we change the major to the correct major to apply for CPT. I also mentioned the end date on the I-20. So this student's I-20 ends June 30, 2023. So as long as they maintain status and they want to apply for CPT, they're eligible to do CPT. Once the student submits the request to the international office and everything is in order, it's approved, it's gonna show on the second page. So if you look on the second page, employment authorizations is at the very top. And the reason that I say we need company's name and address is because we have to input it in the CVIS system, so that when we print the I-20, it's gonna show in the I-20. It only shows the city and the state, but when we actually typing it in, we have to put in the entire number and street name of the address. For example, if you look at this I-20, The student is authorized to begin CPT April 5th, which means the student did all the preparation, submitted all the paperwork, and it's already approved. But even though she's approved, he or she is approved, they cannot start doing the training until April 5th. So maybe the student was just being really good, planning ahead. Maybe the student needed to apply for a social security number. So they did the step with us, and maybe right now they're in the process of getting the social security number. So by April 5th, they'll have everything in order. They can report to the company and begin their training. So this is how you know that the CPT has been approved, because we're going to contact you via email or phone and say, hey, we have the I-20, we finished your request, you're approved. So make sure you receive the I-20. We have talked about CPT today, but if you attended our last week's presentation about OPT, which is also a training benefit, this is just a little table that shows the differences between both of them. So CPT requires students to have the job offer letter ready before applying. OPT does not. CPT requires enrollment in a class or internship, depending on the type of OPT. If it's post-completion OPT, no enrollment requirement. But if it's pre-completion because it's during your studies, then it requires full-time enrollment. CPT is authorized by the international office. OPT is authorized by the government agency. It can take 3 to 5 months. It requires a fee to file, and right now it's $410. CPT does not require a filing fee, so it's for free. You apply, as long as you meet requirements, you get approved. As I said earlier, CPT is authorized only for a specific employer. Once the student receives approval for OPT, it could be for any company as long as it's related to the student's major study. CPT can only be granted and approved before graduation. OPT may be granted before and after graduation. So once you're ready to apply for CPT or OPT and you have questions, then you're gonna meet with the educational advisors to make sure you're doing the proper authorization. We have resources available to help throughout the process. First and foremost, our office is always available to answer any questions. You can reach out to us by phone, email. You can also schedule appointments. The appointments can be via Zoom or they can be by phone. We have our awesome academic counselors. They're gonna help you with your forms. They're gonna help you with your classes. If you have questions about your major, they can also help you with that. Freeman Career Center, that's the to-go department if students are really interested in applying for internships. They're gonna help you throughout the entire process. They even help you finding the internship that is right based on your major. So reach out to them because they are gonna help you throughout the process. We also have outside resources. Eureka is a website where you can create an account, log in, and then based on your major, you can see what kind of occupations you can apply for. So remember, that's important because CPT and OPT require students to do trainings related to their major. So I would strongly recommend that you link into it. Study in the States, it's a government website and it has information about CPT and OPT and anything related to F1 status. Same thing as US Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It's also a government website that it has information about training, employment, F1 status. So I put in the links just in case you're interested. You always have access to ask the advisors. Right now we have caseload. So if the last name is A through J, you feel free to schedule an appointment with me. We all work together. So you can schedule with anyone, but we see the students by last name. We have the link. So always do not hesitate to schedule an appointment, because if you have a question, you want to make sure you get the right answer, or you get an answer before you proceed. You want to make sure you're always doing the proper steps. Other resources are different workshops that we have. They could range from anything to anything that we think that it's helpful for students. Tomorrow we have our insurance provider presenting to international students. So Ms. Carrie Mendoza is presenting tomorrow regarding the GeoBlue insurance that international students have at PCC. On Wednesday, we're gonna have a student health services presenting. They're gonna talk about the services available to international students and to any registered student based on just being a PCC student. So I strongly recommend that you attend both of them. And on Thursday, we have one of our academic counselors presenting on career exploration. So this is good because she presents resources available to students. If students are not quite sure about career, she explains how to select a career or if you need to change. So again, something that I encourage you to do, attend if you're available. Next week, we will present again about OPT in case you missed the last one. So always look at our events calendar. That's where we post all the workshops and events that we are having, either facilitated by our office or by different offices on the campus or even outside resources. Thank you very much for your time. I know I did talk a lot and it was probably pretty fast because it's a lot to cover. So now I'm gonna open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions, we're here to help you. We're gonna answer your questions.
There is one question. It says on page 15, the slide is clipped, so the supervisor's name is a bit invisible on the presentation.
Okay. When we're gonna send you the slides of the presentation, but we just need the contact information of the supervisor. We need the name and phone number and email. Usually that's what it's included in the letter. But it should be visible on the slide once I, or I will take a look at it and fix it before I send it to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
There's a question, if I plan to do volunteer internship that I can gain work experience and is related to my major, does that count as CPT, and do I have to fill out an eligibility form before starting it?
Yes, if the student is gaining experience, training, then yes, even though it may be unpaid, it requires CPT approval. Because volunteer is only, you know, cleaning the beach, a nonprofit organization, going to school and reading to little kids. You're volunteering your time. If the student is involved in a church, they're gonna go volunteer their time, do a Bible study for kids or for adults. That's volunteering. If the student is gaining training related to their major, then that's internship because it's training. Then it requires CPT approval. And it requires enrollment in either on the major class or the internship class.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
What about job shadowing? Does it also count as unpaid internship or CPT?
Job shadowing maybe, just to be on the safe side, I would say it's still unpaid internship, because what I don't want the students to be at a company, then somebody will think that you're working, even though it's unpaid training, you're shadowing. You want to make sure that the government doesn't go to that company and say, why are you here? So if you're approved for internship, you have the legal right to be there. Because if it's a company, it's not volunteer really, because it's a profit company. It's not a nonprofit. So unless that one might be borderline, but unless you have paperwork from the company that it's volunteer, that they're giving you something in writing that is volunteer, then you may be okay, but it may be like really borderline. And if it's borderline, I always recommend students to get the approval, just to be on the safe side and protect the F1 status. Do not ever want to jeopardize the F1 status. Any other questions? So if we don't have any more questions, thank you for being here today. But remember, this is not the last time we can talk about CPT. If questions arise after you review the presentation, we'll hopefully can get it to all of you by tomorrow. You can review the presentation, you can listen to the recorded, and if you have more questions, feel free to schedule the appointment with one of us. So again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow or the rest of the week in the different workshops coming up. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.